This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
And welcome to the program. I am Roby Brock. Glad to have you with us. It is a happy new year to everyone, including John Brummett, columnist with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Did you have a good holiday?
You know, it wasn't bad as holidays go. Some stress, but some relaxation and fun too. I hope you had a good one as well.
It was good. It was all good there. All right, let's pick up. There was a little bit of news middle to late last week. Judge Tim Fox ruled that the state's mask mandate ban was unconstitutional. There had been an injunction. Anyhow, all of this is now formally the judge's order that it is unconstitutional. Let's stick with the legal grounds first. He said that it violates some separation of powers. The school equity funding ruling, he said, was in jeopardy over this, and he cited the state's sovereign immunity provision as well. What do you make of the legal opinion here?
Well, I note that plaintiff's lawyer Thomas Mars says that he's never seen a ruling that he, by his count, had 10 unconstitutionalities cited by the judge. I count maybe seven, and three or more maybes, but even so, it was rather extraordinary. It's so many declarations of constitutional flaw that you have to think the Supreme Court would have to go a long way to overturn all of them. The sovereign immunity, and in his ruling, I should say, as I wrote yesterday, Judge Fox was not very impressed with the Attorney General's office on any basis. He, in his footnotes and in his text, he made several references to what were deficiencies in the representation of the state. I give Attorney General's office a little bit of a pass on that because on that specific point, because the law was so suspect. Their best witnesses would have been extremist right-wing lawyers. They probably didn't, legislators they didn't want to put on the stand. And there's not much to defend. They relied heavily on this separation of powers, which is one of the interesting things in the ruling, like are not separation of powers, sovereign immunity. The state can't be sued. Well, that would mean, as Judge Fox pointed out, that provision of the state constitution and that interpretation that the sovereign immunity would be more powerful than any other provision in the state constitution, such as separation of powers or such as equitable education. He rejected that, and he said, if you argue that, then you could say the legislature could do any crazy thing it wanted to do, and those of us aggrieved would be without recourse. So
I want to dive into that sovereign immunity
Please
argument.
do.
That is a 2018 Supreme Court ruling. It was a 5-2 decision that basically said the state cannot be a defendant in her courts. It's
Right.
really blunt language. When the Supreme Court ruled that in 2018, there was a lot of discussion about changing that, fixing that in the Constitution. It's
Right.
not been done. I could argue pretty credibly that it still is in effect, despite logic and despite Judge Fox's ruling. It's pretty blunt and pretty straightforward.
Yes, but sometimes in the law you can find an accommodation in lower courts, not just in this case, but in some other case where some people are suing the Attorney General for the way she has used public money and for intervening in all these federal lawsuits. She's defending by sovereign immunity there, and two circuit judges, not Judge Fox, two circuit judges have already dismissed that. It is true that if this case goes on appeal to the Supreme Court, this Supreme Court said, hey, we told you. We told you. This saying is simply the state cannot be sued. The judge, to me, that's impractical, and Judge Fox's explanation that there are other provisions of the Constitution that have to be considered as well means that you can't sue maybe for damages. You can't name in a monetary damages in a court unless the state does so by leave through this claims commission process, but that otherwise, of course, you have recourse under other provisions of the Constitution. That's what I hope the state Supreme Court would rule if it finds it necessary to revisit that issue. But we shall see. Yeah. This thing, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be taken to the Supreme Court, probably. But if it is, yeah, the Supreme Court would have the opportunity to say, we told you. And then would really have to do something constitutionally I think, if the Supreme Court were to double down on that strict interpretation.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and I think that's kind of the pivotal point to watch in all of this.
Yeah, that would seem to be the provision. I mean, that's simple enough. Okay, Judge Fox, you're right on everything, but we told you sovereign immunity can't be sued, period. Then all hell breaks loose, and we're trying to, we're realizing the Supreme Court meant what it said on a wholly impractical thing, which would mean that you couldn't have another Lakeview case. You couldn't say public school funding is inequitable and inadequate. You have no recourse on anything that names the state as a defendant. So we'll see about that. Maybe it won't come to that. I hope not.
Yeah. All right. We'll watch for that. There was also some language in the Judge Fox ruling. You've mentioned it, critical of the Attorney General, Leslie Rutledge, critical that no defense witnesses were called, critical that that she may have had some conflicts of interest trying to represent multiple parties in all this. On the political side of this, I have a feeling we are going to see some of those quotes from Judge Fox's ruling in some advertising by some opponents of hers in the lieutenant governor's race. Why do you think the judge went to the lengths that he did to put all of that on paper? It was unnecessary.
Yeah, he could have just cited the deficiencies in the legal arguments in the absence of credible counter arguments without, as I pointed out in a column yesterday, getting really just sort of saying this woman didn't do her job, which is essentially what he said, or when she tried to do it, she didn't do it well. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in Judge Fox's head. I don't know him well enough to assess. I know him a little, but not enough to assess why he would do that. But sometimes judges, I have found, and I've known several, they get irritated with subpar performance by the people presenting arguments to them. And I think in this case, some things just irked him. When, for example, as he points out, he gets no courtroom defense really at all from the Attorney General of the points of the litigation. And then in the post-trial brief, the Supreme Court or the Attorney General's office offers this outline, timeline of things that happened. He said none of these are supported by evidence because you didn't present anything at trial, and in post-trial brief you're asserting a timeline that you never established. I think sometimes judges just dislike that kind of performance in their courts, and maybe that's what it was. I wouldn't think it was an intention to affect any political race. I wouldn't think that Judge Fox would say, hey, I'm going to try to give Jason Rapert or Doyle Webb some campaign advertising. That's not that. And I don't think either of them is going to have enough money to do a lot of campaign advertising. And I don't think that, and I think getting criticized by somebody you can call a liberal judge in Pulaski County is that's not to your detriment in an Arkansas Republican primary, in my view. My money is still on Leslie Rutledge to fill that closet on the second floor manned by the Lieutenant Governor of Arkansas.
All right.
For the next years.
Well, that's a good segue into our final topic here. 2022 has arrived. It is an election year. We've got the governor's race, the U.S. Senate race. Obviously, all the congressional races are up. All the legislative seats are up. All the constitutional offices will be up. There's going to be a big year. What race are you probably most interested in? Which will you find the most intriguing? I'd have to offer that the lieutenant governor's race, despite the role of the lieutenant governor not being all that fantastic, it may be the most interesting one politically.
You may have stumped me, and you stumped me before, but your question asking me to find what is the most interesting thing, most interesting race, I see none that interests me. Do you remember not so long ago when we sat around thinking about what a big year this was going to be, and that this battle royal for the Republican gubernatorial nomination, pitting the three rising stars, first the two rising, Leslie Rutledge and Tim Griffin, for governor to succeed Asa Hutchinson, and then Sarah Sanders comes back and decides she'll take the job. And then we thought for a while, naively, that we're going to have a three-candidate battle royal. And oh my goodness, I remember Leslie Rutledge saying, "You're going to have a whole lot to write about, aren't you?" Well, maybe not. What has happened is with money and with political celebrity and with the dominance of the Trumpian extreme right and Republican primaries, those three people just did a little musical chairs routine. Okay, Sarah, you'll be the governor. You worked for Trump, and you're going to raise $11 million. And Tim and Leslie will just switch offices, and that'll all be preemptively done. I've joked in a column, and I've not really joked, that the Associated Press ought to go ahead and call those races, because I think they're basically done. What we thought was going to be some serious, big time political reporting is just a yawner. So the legislature, the only thing we're going to watch there is that redistricting protected all the incumbents, and the Republicans messed with the Democrats in 3 or 4 places, and so the Republicans are going to probably gain seats they don't really need. They got super majorities already in the legislature. All that interests me right now, and it's not a race, it's a theme. And this, I'm the only person who cares about this, but I'm going to mention it. The Common Ground Arkansas group, they are out there for the purpose of trying to encourage and support less partisan, less extreme, more pragmatic problem solving in the legislature. I think that means they'd like to see 3 or 4 of the extreme conservative senators replaced. I think that means that they can't recruit candidates, but they can sort of encourage a climate in which candidates would come forth. They'd like to see some garden variety, old style, basic conservatives run in Republican primaries from those districts. And I think that's what, and if they could find them, and if those candidates would come forward, I think they could support them with political action committee and that sort of thing. I'm interested in that. In other words, what I'm saying is, all that interests me right now about the 2022 elections in Arkansas are 3 or 4 battles, potential battles, in Republican primaries between conservative Republicans and extreme conservative Republicans. Those are the philosophical parameters of politics as we enter this year, seems to me.
You completely left out the potential ballot measures that could be out there. Those could
Well,
be.
you didn't ask about those. You asked about races.
That's elections in 2022. So.
Well, I'm very interested, obviously, in the David Katz League of Women Voters, other groups have filed the papers for a constitutional amendment to remove redistricting when it comes around in another decade, all of it, legislative and congressional, from the politicians and give it to an independent commission. That's happened already in several states. It's in the voting rights bill in Congress that Democrats aren't able to pass, or at least it's mentioned. I don't know. It's certainly not mandated. States can still do what they want. That interests me. Or any of the other, remind me of what the legislature referred. Maybe that'll be interesting.
They didn't refer this one, but I would think that, you being a Hillcrest liberal, the recreational marijuana would be one you'd be interested in.
The real Hillcrest liberals will tell you I've gone boringly centrist in my old age. So, and no, I can. Any marijuana issue is not of personal interest to me at this stage in my life.
All right. Well, the legislature referred something to allow them to call themselves into special session. And also, I think, giving themselves a little bit more power and latitude. So.
Well, yes, and that yes, that'll be a theme, and I think you can run against those. Thanks for reminding me. Those are important. You can run against those, or you can organize opposition to those along that theme. You want to give more power to these guys who keep passing these unconstitutional laws, and the people can decide. Maybe they do. But yeah, it's clear. I mean, being able to call themselves into session means that if a responsible governor tries to do something to fight the next variant of the coronavirus, and Trent Garner and Bob Ballinger don't like it, they can make a stink, and the legislature can call themselves into special session and run the state in an executive fashion. I think that's a frightful prospect. So thanks for reminding me of that horror story forthcoming. Okay.
Well, just wanted to get your new year off to a great start there, John.
Well, you got my blood boiling a little bit now. Thanks. That's good. I'm ready to go. Raring to go.
Good to get your take. John Brummett, columnist with the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Thank you so much.
Take care, Roby. Bye-bye.